Lewis with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, and I am your host, Miles Lewis, transmitting to you live from Austin, Texas, on behalf of the nonprofit 501c3 Anomaly Archives Scientific Anomaly Institute, founded to preserve collections dealing with the mysterious, the anomalous, the unexplained, anomalistics in general, and to help educate the public about those collections and hopefully provide some rationality to a often very irrational grouping of fields that skeptics like to joke about as being not natural, supernatural, paranormal, anomalous. But isn't that what science is all about? Trying to understand the things that it doesn't understand, trying to detect anomalies, understand them, figure them out. Is it? Is there free inquiry? Are we allowed to interrogate authorities, whether they be scientists or politicians? Are we allowed to interrogate the nature of the universe? Are we free to think and to speak? Yes, we still are. It sometimes might sound like there's less and less of that, but well, thank you for joining us. I wanted to briefly acknowledge last month, I got a phone call from the relative of an old acquaintance. This old acquaintance I had met back in my co-op radio days when I was a frequent guest of various hosts on KOOP, that's 91.7 co-op radio here in Austin, Texas. And those friends had often had me on as guest co-hosts. And for a while, I was doing the co-op evening news. I think it was Thursdays. And it was a fun roundtable with the then studio manager for co-op, Angela Keaton, who went on to work in the Libertarian Party and the antiwar.com staff. And also there often was good friend Scott Horton of Anti-War Radio, and who still does the Scott Horton Show and talks about anti-war foreign policy mostly. And then me talking about anomalous stuff. But I also met a host through co-op named, his pseudonym was Harry Ashburn. And he was a funny guy. And I really enjoyed being his guest and hearing his often corny jokes. I had thought about playing one of them tonight. I was recently re-listening to an old recording of my appearance on his then live radio show, Progressive Forum, and co-op radio, co-op evening news there on 91.7 back in the day. And in fact, the particular one I was listening to was when we were announcing the Texas Ghost Lights mini conference that Rob Riggs organized as part of a event on behalf of the Anomaly Archives. Great event. I've talked about it before. But anyway, I was announcing that, and it was also their fundraiser. But yeah, Harry told a funny joke or silly, corny joke but it really made me laugh. I'm not going to repeat it here. I'll save it for later, maybe. But sadly, I was informed of his passing, and he had long been a supporter of the Anomaly Archives. He gave not a lot of money, but he gave a charitable donation every year, and we'd occasionally exchange emails, and again, mostly corny jokes. But he will be missed, and we just want to acknowledge those folks who've supported us all these years. So thank you for your support, and thank you for being here, and thank you for listening, whether it's live or Memorex, the podcast or the stream. We're glad to be here with you in your head if you're listening to the audio, video if you're looking at my made for radio face. So I think I titled today's show, what was it? I was alluding to it: Conspiracy, Science, and the Freedom to Interrogate Authority and Reality. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, there's been an interesting article that I was featured in, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But again, if you are unfamiliar with the Anomaly Archives, you can go to our website. That's anomalyarchives.org, and you can find links to all of our past shows, as well as our YouTube channel, where we've archived all the streaming events, the video events that we've recorded, trying to put those up as often as possible. And you can find links to past email newsletters that go into some of the different collections that we have. We have over 7,000 books and thousands of periodicals and digital files and that sort of thing. We are still looking for a home here in Austin. It's quite the challenge, but we're really hoping that will happen soon. It's been far too long. We've been sadly in storage since February 2021. Snowpocalypse of February 2021. Anywho, yes, so you can also find links to our Flipboard. That's where we aggregate all of our news articles that we come across, and those look something like this. There's tons of news. NASA asteroid strike unleashes boulder storm as deadly as Hiroshima. This crazy story out of the mirror.com: terrified Peruvian villagers claim they are under attack from 7-foot-tall aliens. It seems easily dismissible, but it immediately reminds me of covert ops done by American special forces in countries where they were imitating vampire attacks to destabilize the forces in that area. Very interesting news interview over at CNN that just died. Paleoanthropologist debunks myth about humans. This is talking about a different species that buried its dead and apparently had symbolic markings at the grave site underground. Interesting stuff like that. So we've got all kinds of links, tons and tons of thousands and thousands of links. But here is what I was going to talk about tonight. Some of you who are close to me had already heard that I was being interviewed by a researcher in the UK, Annie Kelly, and sure enough, it's part of a project called Everything is Connected: The Internet and Conspiracy, or the Influence of the Internet on Conspiracy and Conspiracy Theorists and Conspiracy Communities. And I and several friends of mine had the pleasure of being interviewed by Annie Kelly, and it's part of a larger project. But it apparently, in talking to an editor at the New York Times, where she has written op-eds before, was encouraged to do an article about this research. And in fact, the editor encouraged her to focus on one of her interviewees and do follow-up interviews to make it a more personal article. And that was when she contacted me and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'd like to interview you some more. Really enjoyed talking to you the first time, and let's do this." So if there is a paywall, I believe New York Times, like so many websites, has a three free articles a month. So depending upon how you access it, you may or may not be able to finish it because it's a kind of a lengthy article. The original title, as you may have seen over on the other page, is "How QAnon and January 6th ripped the conspiracy theory world apart. However, they have recently changed the title to Even Conspiracy Theorists Are Alarmed by What They've Seen. And as I said, it's by Annie Kelly, who is a postdoctoral researcher working on conspiracy theories and a correspondent for the podcast QAnon Anonymous. Now, I really like the QAnon Anonymous podcast. I will say, for those who aren't aware, it is an anti-QAnon conspiracy podcast. And as much as I enjoy it, I think they've had some really good episodes where they expound on the nature of conspiracy. It does tend to be quite derisive of those that it finds have beliefs they don't. And while I think we all can relate to laughing at people who believe things that we think are silly or outrageous or even repugnant, I don't really tend to like that as a normal form for one's content. But that said, I still think they're doing some good work, and I really enjoy Annie Kelly's contributions. Also, there is a local filmmaker who is a good acquaintance friend, Brad Abrahams, who also contributes to their episodes. He's done some great work, of course, on UFOs, on different cults here in Texas, as well as inquiries into the interesting New Age community surrounding Mount Shasta, that sort of thing. Whole other thing unto itself, QAnon Anonymous. But the article, it really is a feature focusing on me. It literally starts with my full name and mentioning that I grew up in Austin and going into my background. Many of you who've been listening for years already know plenty about me, but I really like Annie's writing style. I like where she's coming from. From our conversations, I really got the sense that even though I might entertain wilder beliefs than she does, that we are more or less on the same page on a lot of different stuff that has to do with conspiracy theory and the issue of, yes, there are conspiracies, and yes, we have to be vigilant against how people's beliefs in them can lead to violence, but also how we have to really maintain a vigilance about the fact that they do exist. Conspiracies do exist, and the powers that be often do not have our best interests at heart. In fact, I'd say they most of the time never do. So I'll probably be breaking this down more in the future, but it starts by mentioning January 20th, 2021, and that I was trying to keep the peace, and what this is a reference to. If you've been watching this show, you might recall this particular episode of Anomaly-NOW from back January 20th, 2021, where it was just a few weeks after January 6th, and I really was pretty terrified by what we'd witnessed. And with another article fresh in my mind, this Charles Eisenstein article from QAnon's Dark Mirror Hope that he actually published back in December 2020, it gave me comfort and a sense that we really needed to back away and, again, not vilify those that have different views than us, as easy a reflex as that is for so many. So the article, I don't want to go paragraph by paragraph, and it is, it definitely starts by couching me in terms of, well, if I didn't have the virtual background, you would be seeing the kinds of things that she's referring to here, that and that I'm sitting in front of a wall covered with posters of aliens, flying saucers, and Bigfoot. And yes, does that disparage or undermine any ideas parapolitical that I might have to espouse? Certainly. That is obviously a concern with anybody who's trying to be a true political activist, a parapolitical researcher, a conspiracy theorist. And I said openly in this article and to her that I am a conspiracy theorist. And, I do not appreciate the pejorative use of that term. And it has obviously been weaponized, like so many things, to demonize anybody who questions authority. The article also incorporates interviews that she has done with our good friend Greg Bishop, as well as parapolitical researcher Joseph Green. She quotes friends like Robert Sterling, who published the Conformist for so long, and other people who have been tracking UFOs, or rather, excuse me, who have been tracking conspiracy theories since before the internet, during the rise of the internet, and now after we've been living as part of the matrix, part of the internet for so long now. I'm very curious to see where this research effort goes. I think that there's apparently going to be a book. There's a link here to the website for this. I guess I didn't actually have that loaded already, but over at sites.manchester.ac.uk/EIC, everything is connected, and you can find information about the project there. But it appears to be a multi-year interview process, and likely will result in material being published on this website and perhaps in a physical book. It's a very reflective article, and I've gotten only positive responses so far, thankfully, knock on wood. It is a very strange feeling knowing that your full name and city you live in has been blasted out into the blogosphere. And, I don't know where this is going to lead. I certainly don't consider myself a leader in this field. I just am an observer who, of course, often says straight up, I don't know. I am a militant agnostic, which is to say, I don't know and neither do you. And that's why it's so important to ask questions. Now, yes, have we heard that whole I'm just asking questions as a pejorative as well? Yes, we have. Anyway, you might want to give it a try. We'll link to it in the show notes. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it. One thing, there's been about 250 or 60 comments posted. I haven't really read most of those. Normally there's comments on the internet are so filled with vitriol that I really do avoid them. But one that Annie shared with me since its publication is, quote, "Those who have studied biology understand that the mechanism that drives evolution is so simple, it almost seems tautological when described. Random mutations occur. They either survive and replicate or they die out. We like to say, quote, survival of the fittest, but the fittest are simply those that survive and replicate. It is nearly a tautology. We often say internet content goes viral, referring to its quick spread. Indeed, internet content is very much like a virus. It mutates constantly, then is tested in an environment of likes and reposts, its fitness judged by how well it survives and replicates in the social media environment. Traditional conspiracy theorists maybe enjoyed the artistry of crafting their theories. They were, in a way, creationists, devotees of intelligent design. But with social media, artistry is out the window. Instead, it's something more akin to biological evolution. Random mutation, maybe with some genetic engineering thrown in, and then the test, does it survive and replicate, possibly spawning ever new varieties, or does it quickly die out? To the traditional conspiracy theorist, something has been lost, maybe. Love, art, even a bit of divinity. That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion." It reminded me of Susan Blackmore, the British parapsychologist and skeptic, who I believe was inspired by her out-of-body-like experiences. And later she wrote a book called The Meme Machine and talked about, again, this idea of memes, this idea of an idea that replicates and gets retransmitted. And I think that's what this commenter was touching on. So again, you may want to check out this article. One part here, still, Mr. Lewis looks back nostalgically on days when there seemed to be more respect and camaraderie. The aftermath of September 11th and the War on Terror presented, he said, a threat to citizens that the conspiracy-friendly left and right could unite over. Now the rift between the two is deep and vicious. He felt as if the ideas that had first attracted him to conspiratorial thought had been weaponized, pointing people away from legitimate abuses of power and towards other citizens. Indeed, the grieving parents of Sandy Hook, for example, and at times involved real-world violence. Yep, there's quite a few quotes in here from me, and of course here's Greg Bishop being mentioned, where he says, you'd see somebody at a convention who was frothing at the mouth or whatever figuratively, and that's changed into something that's basically a part of the culture now. And Joseph Green, an author and parapolitical researcher, described how in the past at conferences he attended on conspiracy topics, there's always a couple of guys in there who will tell you after they get familiar with you that the Jews run the world. Thankfully, I have not encountered that. Mr. Green had no interest in such ideas, nor did he think they ran much risk of going mainstream. But somewhere along the way, conspiracy spaces on the internet had become, quote unquote, a haven for the lunatic fringe of the right wing, which in turn spilled back into the real world. She also interviewed Jonathan Bain, who, of course, has been chronicling UFO and conspiracy theories for a long time. Well, similar to our Anomaly Archives Flipboard, if you're interested, and I should have prefaced all of this with the views expressed by this guy right here do not necessarily reflect those of the Anomaly Archives or the Scientific Anomaly Institute or its board of directors. I'm mostly waxing on my personal beliefs here, though I try to maintain that a reputable, rational base, but some of you may doubt that if you knew all the things, all the possibilities I entertain. But I have a different Flipboard that was started years ago for PSYOP radio, PSIOP, PSYOP as in psychological operation, but PSI as in psychic operation, where Mac White and I used to do a show. Some of you are quite familiar with, I'm sure. And our tagline was decoding the psychological warfare machinations within paranormal and parapolitical landscapes. And over there, you can find a lot of links to the kinds of things I entertain, the kinds of information I'm interested in, like the fact that, the Twitter files, the Facebook files, all the evidence that is finally coming out about how our government arm wrestled these tech companies to suppress information that was actually true and that was just crediting, that was critiquing or questioning the mainstream narrative. And there are some very important things coming out, but I will leave that to you to discover on your own. But suffice to say, we need to be ever vigilant. And to the idea that I was mentioning with the title of this episode, another parapolitical outlet was reminding me of this famous interview between Charlie Rose and Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan, of course, being considered quite the skeptic when it comes to things like UFOs and pseudoscience. But I really do think there's some powerful information here, and I want to share that with you. So hang tight.
My feeling, Charlie, is that it's not that pseudoscience and superstition and New Age so-called beliefs and fundamentalist zealotry are something new. They've been with us for as long as we've been human. But we live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
That's right. And if we don't understand it, by we, I mean the general public, if it's something that, oh, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? Just some members of Congress? But there's no more than a handful of members of Congress with any background in science at all. And the Republican Congress has just abolished its own Office of Technology Assessment, the organization that gave them bipartisan, competent advice on science and technology. They say, we don't want to know Don't tell us about science and technology.
Surprising. The danger of all this. I mean, this is not the thing that...
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology, in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson laid great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.
Couldn't have put it better myself. And it reminds me of something that we touched on the last show. And I wanted to thank my guest co-host from last week's show, Kurt Collins and Chris Rutkowski, who are the admins over at the UFO Updates Facebook group, and who are good friends and skeptics, but also, very much interested in the UFO scene and trying to be rational about it. But we started talking about Charles Fort, after whom Fortean phenomena is named, and this idea of just strange phenomena, the looking at those anomalies. But it was through my interest in Charles Fort that I became aware of a very simple word that to me epitomizes what science really is, and that is the idea of intermediatism, that science is always an intermediate understanding of the universe, and that we are, as Carl Sagan said, constantly interrogating the nature of reality and the authorities who they themselves are looking into these mysteries. So with that, I will just say I hope that you will all continue on this journey, this seeker's quest for truth, enlightenment, a better understanding, intermediate though it may be. And tune in next week when we'll continue this journey and we'll talk about some other new news. Good night.